Welcome everyone to the Flowing Health podcast. Today I'm really excited to have Anne Scottlin with us. And Anne Scottlin is an award-winning author, motivation and emotional wellness coach who also spent 10 years working as an actress in Hollywood. Her focus is now on teaching others how to maximize their personal impact and find their passion. So welcome, Anne.
Hi, thank you, Alessandro. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Great to have you here. And Anne and I met quite recently in a networking group, and we've had a couple of chats, and I've been on one of her shows, which we'll go into later. But there's so much that Anne has done in her life that makes my life seem quite boring sometimes. So maybe we'll start a little bit with your story. Obviously, you've been an actress as well, and you're really making a big impact in the world, helping other people as well make an impact. So should we start with your background a little bit and your story?
Sure, yeah, I have what you might call a very non-linear career because it's taken several zigs and zags, and a big part of that is really kind of, I guess what you could say finding yourself, or I think finding ourselves is really about finding our passion, like finding what we were really meant to do. It's less about money and it's less about status, and it's more about, am I really fulfilled and I feel like I'm making an impact? So it was a long journey for me. I had a very unusual upbringing for an American kid. Grew up in a very extreme right-wing religious sort of cult-like environment, and was homeschooled until I was almost 16. And by that, I don't mean in the modern way where you still have lots of friends and do group meetings. This was just me and my two little brothers out in the middle of nowhere. So we were really preparing for the end of the world. Pretty much whatever your imagination takes you, it was probably even more extreme than that. So a very isolated childhood, but what I did really fall in love with, without a lot of friends, family, mentors, extended family rather, teachers, it was just the core family for the most part. What I really did fall in love with was nature. Nature really became my go-to for inspiration. And while I had religious practices and so forth at the time, which were, taught and required, when I really needed to reset, I focused on nature. And that is the big gift I came away from, because we had no television, no pop radio, no fiction, no movies. So it was really very, very few books and then nature. So I learned a lot from that book, which was a real blessing throughout my life.
And was that spending time like by yourself? Were you with your brothers, or just hanging out, observing and communing in a way with nature?
Yeah, really by myself. I was 4 and 6 years older than my brothers, so in a weird way, I was kind of the oldest only girl, second mom, if you will, kind of, doing those older responsible things. And the boys were only 18 months apart, so they were kind of best buds and hanging out and doing little kid things. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time on my own, in some very beautiful environments, like where I could see the house, but I could climb this big hill behind the house that was covered with forest and rocks and trees and amazing wildflowers in the springtime, because this is really, really, really way out there. And yeah, everyone called it Anne's Rock because I went up there. Was this little rock outcropping, and I would go up there, climb up there, and sit there and just observe everything. Watch the sunrise or watch the sunset. Make friends with the chipmunks. Like seriously, it's unbelievable. Now, even I look back, I'm like, wow, how could I have not been super bored? It's like, well, you didn't know any different, so you weren't. So you instead focused on details, which I'm very detail oriented, using your imagination, creating my own stories, which, led me down the path of storytelling, because I was, wrote my first play and of course started it at like when I was 10 and started writing poems and stories and just becoming very creative, because that was all there was to do other than work.
Wow. And then from there, how did that lead to maybe the acting career? Did you, at what age maybe did you get into that? And
So that was kind of a long circuitous route as well, because I did get to go to a very tiny private religious school, high school, and then a very small religious college. And I got married during college, so very young, and married someone from my faith, and kind of felt like this is what was supposed to happen. I was getting 2 degrees in college in history and theology, and um, but, I'd really been raised to sort of be, even at this much more modern time, right? Like kind of the 1950s housewife, ideal, very patriarchal system. And so, I kind of went into that, and it wasn't all bad, and it was some fun. And, I married who I thought was a good person. I think he was. But over time, found out that he had a lot of sociopathic tendencies. And the challenge for me was that I didn't know anything about anything. I had never had my own full-time job. I mean, I'd worked all my life part-time, but I'd never like had a career job of my own. I'd never had my own apartment. I'd never really been on my own. I'd moved out of my parents' house into the college dorm, and out of the college dorm into my husband's house. So you have this fear of not being able to cope or survive without this other person, and especially from sort of the myopic worldview I was coming from. So it took me a while to come to terms with what I should do. And of course, still very religious. So for the most part, I didn't think divorce was on the table as an option. Um, in the end, I was eventually found out what was going on, which was he was living multiple lives. He had other women and homes and cars in other states. And you just, how do you fix that?
Did you find,
And
was that just a total surprise, or were you suspicious because of behavior, or?
I was suspicious, but I didn't know how egregious, to what extent.
Yeah.
I was suspicious that, maybe he was seeing someone. But then again, I was extremely sheltered and very, very trusting. And I was kind of the sitting patsy for it. I mean, I was kind of could do the whole arm charm thing, entertain, do whatever. And then, but I didn't really know, what to watch for and what to be aware of. I had to hire a detective to find out, literally, because he was very, very good at what he did.
Yeah.
um, but that really changed everything for me because, I did go through the divorce. I filed for divorce. But I wasn't supported by my religious leaders. There's, a lot of, well, the only option is reconciliation. I'm like, how? I mean, like, not even if I would forgive him, I don't think he wants to be with me. Like, what do you do? Or a very close relative who told me, well, just so long as you can, I'm glad you're safe, but as long as you'll always be married to him in heaven. I'm like, why would
Oh,
I want? Okay. Um, so you kind of have these moments where my faith had been very strong growing up. Again, firstborn, type A, Capricorn, if you like. I mean, this was just me. I'm like, well, I can outperform the adults. So I pretty much just was an adult by the time I was 12, not in my lifestyle, but in intellectually, and I, teaching at my own church, and just very kind of stepped into that. And I was like, well, I can out religion the religious people. I'm assertive. I have a lot of determination and willpower. And so when that all kind of came crashing down, though, it was a very lonely place, because where is what I would call God, right? Where is divine power? Whereas I wasn't the kid who rebelled and, had all the fun and all the parties. I did follow all the rules, and then this still happened. So I was extremely confused by all of that and really lost. I realized I hadn't really had my own identity. I was so and so's wife, and that was kind of the end of it. And I was like, wow, I don't even know if I can support myself, because I never had, is all. I mean, I knew I was a hard worker. I knew I was a smart and a quick learner. But so it was a very tough time for a year or two there, just trying to figure out what to do, moving back across the country to the West Coast where I'm from. And I think one of the biggest things that really helped me was I'd had a mentor once that had told me, a woman, and she said 2 things. One was, and you'll appreciate this, Alessandro. One was, I'll speak as a woman. Be sure you always have some close female friends as well as, say, your life partner. And I
mm,
think the same is true for men. because you can't expect, again, I was coming from a very unusual world. You can't expect your life partner to be all things to you.
Yeah.
And especially if things go bad.
Yeah.
And so I had taken her advice and I had made a few really close friends who were very supportive. And the other thing she said is if you're really at the bottom, then, and you're really stuck and you can't get out, then find your joy by bringing joy to others. Start helping other people, start giving back to get you out of your own head. And it was absolutely true. And that's when I started looking for other opportunities. That's why I started getting involved in Amnesty International and volunteering and a variety of things that really let me feel like I contributed, and was needed, and also just helped me really appreciate, puts you in perspective when you see other problems that are worse than yours, much, much worse than yours. You start to really be like, oh, I guess I'm kind of okay. So that was a long transition, and ultimately went back to grad school to answer your question. Very long way around. Went back to grad school, which I wasn't able to do when I was married. It wasn't that idea wasn't supported at the time. So went back to grad school, and then ultimately in school, back in grad school, ran into accidentally the acting world and got involved with some campus productions, and eventually thought, maybe this is how I make an impact in the world. And
Yeah. Why not?
yeah, so that was kind of how that started.
Yeah.
And then, it took me for 10 years in working in Hollywood, and just, such a complete opposite world from how I grew up.
It's been incredible. I mean, I can't imagine going from that kind of enclosed, middle of nowhere world, as you put it, to the world's your oyster. Literally, you're in Hollywood.
I mean, it's crazy. And what's funny is I was in Hollywood and I was training and acting and got reps and, all of it, and working. But I couldn't tell you half anything about like American TV shows from before I was about 20 because I hadn't watched them.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
It
yeah,
was really funny to be in an industry where I absolutely had very little knowledge,
yeah.
of pop culture, movies, music, any of that. So a very, definitely when you feel like you're a fish out of water, that was absolutely how I felt. But I
Wow,
knew
must
I
have
had talent.
taken you a while to catch up on all the shows, and people say, "Haven't you watched this?" And
I mean, seriously, I'm sitting on my couch at night as a grown adult, and at this point had gotten remarried, and watching like the black and white shows just so I knew what they were about. It's like I Love Lucy and stuff, and they're like, "What are you watching?" And I was like, "Well, I figured I should at least know what it's about."
I'm catching up. Yeah,
Catching up on a lot, believe me.
yeah,
Yeah. So that was really, informative. It definitely is like not therapy. I had plenty of that, but almost an alternative form of therapy when you really commit to a craft, especially one where you're representing human beings and their stories. You really have to do a lot of soul searching. You really have to find yourself in order to be able to portray others authentically. So for me, it was a huge dig down. Like I didn't know how to get, visually angry
mm,
because I'd never been allowed to be angry. I mean, I had bleeding ulcers in my 20s because I had all this repressed stress and anger, but I didn't know how to express it. So I had to learn how to curse on stage because you have to if the script says so.
yeah.
And it was so weird and awkward. Yeah, or show rage. But really kind of got to know who I was outside of this box that I had spent my life in.
Yeah,
And um, yeah, so, and then that eventually led into, teaching and coaching, first for an acting studio, and then, into, personal training and coaching later.
wow, that's incredible in journey in that short time. And I know then you wrote. I love what you said about helping, doing things for others, because that actually brings so much back to us, because it's easy to wallow. The other day I was talking to somebody, and she was saying she's a really good wallower. Uh, but she only wallows for a day. Like she'll cry all day and bawl her eyes out, and then it's done. But she'll always do it for a day. She'll give herself a day to wallow. And I just love that. I thought
I do too.
that's the way to do it, rather than 5 years, a little bit every day. So I might take that on. I might become a wallower for a day a month or something.
Yes. No, it's true. And actually, it's one of the things, I eventually moved into emotional wellness and global impact space, and made that into my forever kind of career, because that's where I found my talents. But some of the things that I taught, that I teach people are, in fact, it's in my book, which isn't usually right on my desk here. Anyway, Live for Joy, which is 280 pages, full color. It's a very special experience, I call it. And it talks about, when you get stuck in that cyclical thinking, which we talked about the other day, or when you're just in a dark place, a sad place, give yourself a chance to feel it. And then also learn to take a break. If you're having trouble stepping out, like she sounds like she's got her day cycle, she's got the system down, which is, even if it's for 5 minutes or an hour or a day, to move on and just say, I'll think about this dark thing later, like the bills or a relationship issue, or because if you focus on it all the time, it'll really suck your joy dry. You just have nothing left to give and you're miserable. So just practicing kind of letting go and moving on, even if sometimes it's like it has to be a minute.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's great advice. And so to come to your book, which I know is a best-selling book, Live for Joy, we'll put the links in below. People can find that presumably on Amazon, can they?
Yes.
Yeah. So is it pictures, quotes, inspiration?
Yes. So I really wanted to write a personal empowerment book for people that only had a minute or two, instead of, listening to a whole chapter or reading a whole chapter of a book. And I'm very kinesthetic. I'm totally involved in the world. I came from being a childhood in nature, like everything, colors, feelings, textures. So this book is especially nice, of course, in the hardcover, which is the one I make the least on, but it's still the nicest. You get that great feeling. It's got a fantastically beautiful cover, which I'll show you if I can. And then every page is basically, there's a full color page with every quote. Now these quotes it's not a compilation. It's all original composition. Here's
Wow. So they're all your quotes, yeah?
I can't see it. Oh, well, there it is.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, we can see. Yeah, yeah. Beautiful,
Mhm.
beautiful.
Yeah. So it's all original. It's very philosophical, inspirational, motivational. There's 12 chapters. So it's not just about joy.
Yeah.
It's a lot about the other elements of life that our joy is built on. I love this, waking up your own potential, of course. I love chapter 3, be a benevolent world citizen. Like that's so important to finding your own joy, is that giving back. You're learning to motivate yourself, not having to rely on other people to get you out of that funk that you're in. And even chapter 12, which is one of my favorite, which is called Learn to Love the Endings. Because we often think the endings of your childhood, a career, a relationship, even perfect health, whatever that is somehow the end, and it's not. It's often the beginning. So yeah, original content and fun illustrations. This is actually from an artist in the UK, I think, if you can see it. So here's a picture, this page, and I apologize for my background today. I don't have a green screen. This is I think it's in the yard, on the grounds of a museum. So it's lawn and trees, and then there's this huge circular mirror with the hole in the middle. So what you're actually seeing is partly behind you, even though you're walking forward,
Got
right?
it. So it's not glass that you're looking through it. It's a
No,
mirror.
it's actual mirror. And so, and
Wow.
then the quote, the original content is, sometimes the path you think you see ahead is really the path you have just left behind. Open your perspective to new possibilities, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of times what we worry about, things that we focus on or obsess on, are based on our past and not what our future could be. So don't let the past totally inform your future. Realize that maybe you're just looking at the past, and you could move forward. So there's so much. There's a whole chapter on nature, but it's an extremely beautiful book, and everyone who writes me about it says this. I keep this on my bedside table, and I read one in the morning, or my desk, or my coffee table. So it's really special. I call it an experience.
Beautiful. No, and I've seen lots of great testimonials on your website for the
Oh,
book, and people, I think there are some pages there that people can look up. And I noticed what I love now, that you're inspiring and training and coaching leaders. So you say on your website, my passion is powerfully supporting leaders and change makers make the world a better place. So I think we could all do with that right now. And so just out of interest, how do you, you obviously you coach them, and is there any particular sort of method you use, or do you just kind of see where they're at and guide them, because you've made the journey yourself? Is it kind of from your own experience that you guide them?
Yes, I'm not a card reader or, but I'm extraordinarily intuitive by nature. So
Hmm.
that's a gift. I think all that observing as a childhood and then learning to be even more intuitive through, formal acting training and all those other things. So I'm able to click in, if you will, with people really quickly and find out where they are and where they want to go. And also a very strategic minded. So it's not just let's feel better, which is great, like let's improve your emotional wellness, but let's also take action. I love to work. I think even somewhere on my website it says I really like to work with motivated people, people who want to really step out. It's not therapy, even though, we get to talk about great things if they want to. It's more about let's take action. Let's take strategic action in your life. Um, and or the world. Let's make a difference. What's your legacy going to be? And I've worked a lot in also in retreats, in training, in groups, with helping people find what is their real passion. My website is Global Impact League, which is basically bringing together groups of people who want to create an impact and want to do it now instead of wait till they're older or retired or have more time or have more money or whatever all the excuses are. But I found that it's never too soon to start now and to really get excited about making that impact or leaving that legacy, creating the world you want. And part of that is being in your own best self as well, so that you can really bring that to the table. So it's partly personal impact. So how can you live in your best self and really thrive? And
Mm.
then the impact around, it could be business, it could be humanitarian, but creating an impact is what my life is about. And my choice was to do that exponentially by helping a whole lot of other people create theirs.
Wow, I love it. I love it. I think it's just greatly needed. And I know during the pandemic, so many of us had, were forced to have time, which wasn't a bad thing, to really look at, where are we heading and what is our purpose? And certainly I really tuned into my sort of values and my purpose in life. And even though I'm 65 now, it took me 63 years to work that out. So I think it's never too early to start, as you say. And I think it's great to
No.
inspire people to make a difference now. And we know that, for the environment, for those around us, by tuning into what we're really here for, we can make a great impact in the world. That's
And
amazing.
that's really what leadership is all about, right? It's
Mm,
not necessarily that you're famous or that you're in charge of a huge company. I mean, it can be. I work with all kinds of leaders, but it's also just taking a lead,
mm,
setting an example,
mm.
living your life as an example and as an inspiration for others to follow, to join you, to combine our efforts to work together, to focus on our commonalities instead of only our differences, and really like moving forward together. And I feel like a lot of people went through that during COVID. Sort of, so many people quit their day jobs or their corporate jobs and said, "Let's make an impact." And if I, you need to make money to survive, and that's you should be able to live well, but also how can you really make a difference in your world? I think people have found that just entertaining ourselves to death is kind of hollow in the end.
Mm.
I mean, it's fun,
Well,
it's
it leads to death, like you said. It's entertaining ourselves to
literally,
death.
literally. And we all kind of live under this numb spell of media, of news, of, I watch TV, but, TV, movies, games, whatever it is, instead of reaching out to our fellow man. Now, you don't have to do it physically. There's nothing wrong with the virtual connecting with people like we are right now in the virtual world. You don't even have to do that. If anything, it's easier than ever because now you could be literally anywhere on the planet
Yeah.
connecting to other people who you can, combine forces with, who you can create change with, locally, nationally, internationally. It doesn't matter because now it's so easy to connect, that you can really have that global family and really change that global conversation.
Yeah, well, like this will go out, as a podcast on YouTube as well as a video, and that can reach, millions of people. I mean, some of these videos I see in these music videos have like 3 billion views. I think not a million, billion. It's like what? Half the world. It's
Wow.
incredible. No, I mean it's really, and some of them I've never even heard of. So
Yeah.
that shows I'm a bit out of touch, but it's that influence and actually a positive influence. Because, like you say, I think there's a lot of fear coming through the media, through the TV. And I think it's for each of us to really realize that we can empower ourselves and not give in to this system that often is keeping people small in a way. So I think it's amazing work that you're doing. And I know that you've also recently started, I know you've got your own podcast, but also you've started a show, USA Global TV and Radio podcast, quite recently, the last 2, 3 months, I think, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, literally just the beginning of this year, and it's airing on that USA Global TV network. And the show is a live streaming show. It's called "I'm Spiritual dot dot dot," but and I had fun playing with that title just because it related to me very personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a big part of my experience was coming from such an extraordinarily aggressive, let's just say, religious experience, and then feeling like I lost my identity even in the midst of that, and then got left high and dry, and then spending those years, trying to figure out, what am I? Am I agnostic? Am I atheist? Am I religious? Am I spiritual? What am I? And so, my journey, which is never over, is that I'm a very spiritual person and I embrace so many aspects of so many faiths and traditions. Obviously, I'm still rooted in my original, Christian background, but being able to have that open conversation and make people comfortable to come in and say, I just want to hear what other people's experiences are. I want to explore. I don't want to be like hit over the head with this one size fits all message. I don't care if it's,
Yeah.
theology or yoga, it doesn't matter. They can all have good elements and sometimes not so good elements. What can you find that really connects you to your higher source of energy? What is that? And we've had absolutely great guests, yourself included, and really making an impact. And it's been a real hit.
Yeah, there's some really amazing guests. I've watched quite a few of them myself. So we'll put the link in again
Oh, thank you.
at the bottom, and please subscribe to it and listen in for all the different aspects. Because ultimately, I also believe, we're all spiritual, but I was brought up Catholic, and often in my religion, what I see in Sardinia, for example, where I'm from, there's a real lack of spirituality in it. But actually, religion has spirituality, always has had, but often if it's separated and
Mhm.
people are made to feel guilty or that they've sinned. I mean, in Sardinia, often you see these old women dressed in black for years after their husbands die in church, beating their chest, saying, "My fault, mea culpa, mea culpa." It's like, hang on. Firstly, it's not your fault. Secondly, go out in the sun and and live your life, because your husband would have wanted that. Love is, to be able to express ourselves. So when it's separate, I think that then we're in trouble. So I love the fact that you're sort of promoting that, and can be religion with it as well. And I notice you've got some people from different religious organizations, which is great. But the spirituality is the key that I believe binds us all together, and is the aspect that is there forever.
Absolutely. Yes, because yeah, spirituality is, again, as I've said before, we need a new word so that people don't get an instant reaction. But your spirit-ness, your soul-ness, your what's observing your mind think, that part of you, what's beating your heart, whatever that is, that higher energy, when we're connected to that and we're in free flow, that's when we really feel our happiest, our most powerful. Now, you're not always 100% happy 100% of the time, but really connected, engaged, grounded, at peace. It's really funny because when I was, practicing as a young person, very specific kind of religion, I was terrified of dying. Now I'm not afraid of dying. It's the strangest thing. You would have thought that religion would have had the opposite effect, but or as a progressive pastor I had on the show last week said, he's like, I run into people all the time. They're scared of heaven and they're scared of hell. And it's like, okay, so what about just being connected now? What about finding heaven now? What about, even Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within you. What about connecting
Yeah.
now to that source of power and joy and energy? Because it's energy too. And,
Yeah.
and you relate to that, but it really is the energy for life, as opposed to just going in a dark hole and wishing it was all over. And most of us have been there at some point in our life. I have, but is actually being connected. And so that's what I tried to be, hardcore atheist for like a year. And it almost killed me, literally. I couldn't do it because I was already so just spiritually oriented
Yeah.
that it was too much. Like it just was, I felt in full despair. And
Yeah.
that's what I feel for people who've come from, whether it's very conservative religions or none at all. But, how do you find their own personal connection? Because guess what? We are not all the same. We don't look the same. We don't think the same. We don't sound the same. We've not had the same experiences. We don't have the same education. So how can you expect one size to fit all, as opposed to, if you're religious, wonderful. If that serves you and supports you, that is amazing. But could you even elevate your spiritual experience within your religion? And I love, Alessandra, how you said you can have religion without real spirituality, and vice versa. So I think that is very apropos.
Yeah, and you mentioned nature earlier. I mean, people who kind of wonder what we're talking about sometimes with energy, spirituality. Look at what keeps nature alive is this a kind of life force, and that keeps us alive as well. Even if we don't use the word spiritual, there's an energy in the Qigong tradition. They talk about energy and information, and we know about the information. For example, I remember hearing that Mozart, even though he was suffering a lot in his life, but he got this information of his music coming down to him as an incredible inspiration, and he never corrected a note in his music. So this was information literally handed down to him from where? From a mysterious source, and that mysterious natural source is what gives, I believe, keeps nature alive, gives us life. And spiritual is just another word. And if people don't like that, just use another word. Use natural law. I know in Buddhism, I follow quite a few of these gurus. And Buddhism isn't a religion, but it's a philosophy. But they talk about, because people don't like the word Buddhism, and they'd say, let's talk about natural law. And everyone would agree with that. There are natural laws. If you're good, if you do good deeds, generally good will follow us. And that's life. That's a natural law. And so I think
Yeah, that's beautiful.
it's a word not to be afraid of. And I think so many more people are realizing that there is a kind of higher self, or a kind of super conscious, or an inspired part of ourselves. And many of us, you mentioned nature, when we're in nature or we're in front of a sunset, we think there's something magical, and maybe it's a magic or a mystery that is here to save us all in our current situation. Because I think we really need to step up as a society to help each other more, and help the environment, and really make a better world for our children and grandchildren and everybody.
Yes, and that really translates into every aspect of your life, or into your job, no matter what your job is, whether you really love it or hate it. Maybe you should make a change, maybe not, but that being connected, that inspiration, that being in flow, I can relate to a little more easily, perhaps because I'm a creative person. I'm a writer, I'm an actor, I have a very artistic mind. And so it's easy to see how, when you're in flow, like you just said, like Mozart not correcting a note, or you stop second guessing yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I write, I realize that I'm like editing as I go, and I'm like, oh, I'm not in flow, because I'm not just letting it come through. And that's how I work and teach and coach people too, is you get in flow. I always say, I know I'm in flow, and this is a personal experience. I know I'm in flow when after I've given a public speech or worked with a group or worked with a client, I don't even remember what I said because it was so in the moment and instinctive that you know you're in flow. And Einstein, I'm going to have to find this direct quote and make sure I have it absolutely right, but he basically said something like, the closest thing to a spiritual language is your own imagination. Because that is sort of like, that is the radio signal to whatever that larger energy is. And when you're in your imagination, when you're being creative, when you're in your joy, that is when you get really, really connected. And it can be in any job, even if you're flipping burgers, which I did. you know, you can still be in the space of being present, of being creative, of being compassionate to the people around you, of being a presence instead of just taking up space. I think there's a real difference between the two.
Yeah, and you come across people who really have a sense of presence and peace. Even I've seen them, cleaning streets, and you think, God, not I wish I had his job or her job,
Sure.
but they look so at peace with themselves. And that's a kind of internal thing, but also it's a connection to probably, whether it's spirituality, faith, religion, but something beyond ourselves. I always think of that as whatever's giving us life and takes it away, to respect it and use it. And when you're in flow, that's guiding us. Like you say, it's guiding our intuition, it's guiding our lives. And I think better to be guided by that than the news or the fear or the way we're controlled by I'd say maybe the media, and it's becoming more and more difficult because there's so much information coming from all sources, from the even if you don't watch the TV, which I hardly ever watch, comes through the phone, and if I don't have the phone, I hear it from someone else.
Yeah.
So,
You cannot hide anymore. It is so true. Yes, I think I stopped watching the news in the fall of 2017, if that speaks to anyone. I just cut it off and I never started again. I used to be a news junkie. Like I would just be obsessed with it. I just cut it off. I said, I have too much opportunity to do good and to use my energy and my imagination to make positive change in the world. And I'm a really sensitive person. I'm an intuitive person. So if I saturate myself in negativity and sadness, it goes all the way to the root and I become almost immobilized. I cannot. So for me, I'm not saying you should just live with your head in the sand. You should just pretend the world isn't out there. Absolutely not. You can stay informed in an intentional way without going down when like news becomes gossip, and even the news on the TV repeating every 10 minutes, and they're just like,
yeah,
it's just one more person's opinion about something. You're like, no, this is not, it's not helpful. And it actually kind of paralyzes us from doing the kind of good work that which could change the world, which could make it a better place, which is changing it and making it a better place. Because I and you, we know people, and we work with people who are absolutely doing just that. Clients of mine that are all over the world making an impact, whether that's, a soccer player who's now working to get funding for kids so they can play, even if they come from a poor background and don't have the money to invest to get the training. It's like basically scholarships for kids, whether it's an after school program with one of my UK friends who didn't get his our high school diploma, and or any professional training. Now he's offering those classes for high school age kids, even if they don't graduate, they get professional training. Or people, you're creating funding and entrepreneurial opportunities for women in Africa. Or maybe you're just doing something right at home or virtually. It doesn't matter though, because you're making an impact. Because here's what I always say, you're making an impact no matter what. The question is it a good impact? Is it a bad impact? Is it an impact just on the shape of your couch cushion? What is it? Like, you are making an impact, but what kind of impact are you going to make? Just being in the world, you're creating an impact. So
why not make a good one if we can, as you say. Thank you so much, Anne. It's been amazing. And just out of interest, with when you work with leaders, change makers, is there a program? Is it just a one-to-one? or groups or both?
Sure. So it's both. So periodically, I start new cohorts within my Global Impact League specifically, which is people who want to create change now. They want to create their new, either a nonprofit organization, or they want to become a social entrepreneur, which just means you're changing the world for the better, but you're allowed to make money doing it, basically. And you want to start, even if it's the smallest program. So we have cohorts that do that. We're connecting you on a global level to other people doing the same thing. We have guest speakers come in and help you walk through whatever your next thing is. And then for those who are more interested in, individual work, I have the one-on-one VIP coaching. Now, you don't have to be in the group to be in the VIP coaching. That can really be whatever you want it to be, but helping you really find your power and make the impact that you want to make. And it's so much fun. So much fun working with people. And you can see some of the testimonials on my website.
Wow, I wish you'd come and work with the government over here in the UK.
Yes. That'd be great.
I'm not going to name any names, but I think people watching maybe know where we can maybe make a positive impact in their lives and in our lives, because they affect us all.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. For sure.
Well, it's been amazing, Anne. Thank you so much. And look, I will put all the links below. And any final thought that you'd like to leave people with, because you've given us so much to sort of mull over, and it's been amazing.
Wow. Yes, actually, because it even goes to the political environment and everything else you were just speaking to, which is give yourself a break. Don't live from a place of guilt, because sometimes we even feel guilty for the things beyond our control, like the condition of a country, even though you voted or whatever that means, right? You just feel down. You feel like somehow you're failing, or you're failing, as the collective. Well, maybe to some extent that's true, but also give yourself a break, because if you're under that dark blanket all the time, you can never come up and feel the sun, let alone share it with anyone else. So give yourself a break. Don't be too hard on yourself, and really find the joy in your life today, because we only got today for sure. So you might as well really enjoy it.
Great. Find the joy today and take time for self-care. Have a break, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much, Anne.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.